Corla, I'd like to follow up on my colleague's comments. I welcome this piece of legislation. I thank the Regional Independent Group. I think it's one of the pieces of the jigsaw that we need to deal with the whole insurance fiasco that we have in this state at this point in time. I also accept what others have said in relation to the fact that if somebody goes into court and perjures themselves, whether that's in relation to a false claim or claiming an injury to be worse than it is, or whether it relates to something that can be incredibly hurtful or painful to somebody, that needs to be seen as a crime and there needs to be action taken. I also welcome what the Minister for Justice said in relation to increasing the powers in relation to the Gardaí and in dealing with such types of fraud. I think that's absolutely required. But we've been talking about the insurance problem in this state for a considerable amount of time. I think Deputy Pearse Doherty has made the point in relation to obviously the dysfunction in the motor industry, and I think the major tenet of what he said was the point is there are false claims, there are exaggerated claims, but that the motor insurance industry itself was able to play on these from a point of view of jacking up people's premiums. And this is where we need government action and we need accountability and oversight. We also need to see Deputy Doherty's Consumer Contracts Bill to be enacted as soon as possible. And I believe that to be a failing on the part of the government that they haven't already done that. There have been a number of solutions that have been proposed in relation to dealing with the Book of Quantum. We have the Judicial Council, and it got off to a rocky enough start, so we're not exactly sure where that goes. I know that in conversations I would have had previously when I would have been dealing with Deputy Gerry Adams and with Minister Michael Darcy, and in fairness, he seemed to be somebody who was over his brief and was looking at possible solutions in relation to that, and that there may be the necessity for constitutional change. Because there are two things. There are the fact that there are exaggerated claims, and there are the fact that sometimes this is used by the industry, but there are also cases where in particular sectors we have absolute dysfunction. We are talking about the leisure and entertainment industry, and we are now talking about the community sector that is about to get absolutely hammered. In my own town of Dundalk, within the last fortnight, I've been dealing with a case of Merhevenamore Community Centre, a community facility that has done absolutely fine work in the last period, and also in its long history in an area that suffers from severe disadvantage. And community facilities like this do absolutely brilliant work, but the reality is, this is a community facility that was charged 2 years ago in around €3,000 in relation to insurance. It then went up to in around 6,000, and then this year it was told that it couldn't be insured. And initially it couldn't be insured because it had made use of bouncy castles, which are obviously necessary for children's parties, etc. And then even when they removed this, they still couldn't get cover. And I have to commend the work of Mandy Fee of Pelican Promotions, who we have worked with for a considerable amount of time and met with Minister Darcy in relation to the idea is ELISA. It's basically self-regulation within the industry, within the leisure and entertainment industry, and particularly companies that would involve themselves with bouncy castles. And in fairness, I think it's an idea that has huge merit, but also in relation to the work she's done, she's built up a huge level of relationship with insurance companies and underwriters. And due to that, we were able to get, for Merhevenamore Community Centre, a really, really good quote. But if it wasn't for that relationship and that piece of work, we were into disaster territory. And in speaking to them, and the information that's coming back is that this is going to move beyond community centres, the community sector, the leisure and entertainment industry, and it's going to move into all facets of our society. That underwriters in Britain who are, at this point in time, are very, very slow to quote for anything that exists in this state. And again, that is the fear of the big claims. That is the fear of somebody going into court, and that the fear that a huge payout will happen. While I accept the necessity where people are genuinely injured, where there are genuine problems, and that's why you have insurance to cover for these sort of problems, but that we have absolute dysfunction, and the way we live our lives, the very society we have, like we're talking about the particular straitened circumstances that community facilities, that community resources such as this community centre in Merhavnamore are facing due to the fact of the pandemic and reduced monies in and all the rest of it. That we all knew about the insurance problem, but it's going from being an insurance problem to a no insurance problem. And in that case, we need to ensure that we have facilities where our kids can go, whether that's for sports training, whether that's for and here not only our kids, I suppose also their parents, whether it's yoga, whether it's dancing, whatever facilities we have. Like, people need breaks. We all know the damage that has been done in the last while in relation to mental health and mental health services and the lack of. So therefore we need to ensure that these other factors that we have are there and available to us. So I would call on the Minister, as she is the representative of government in the room, that she would speak to her colleagues, and I know that I will do a follow-up meeting. I've already had initial conversations with Minister Fleming in relation to moving on some of these parts. But in fairness, when I talk about ELISA, and I talk about the possibility of regulation within the industry, and when we talk of the possibility of block buying of insurance for sectoral groups and whatever, we are also need the government to take action, to take the insurance companies to task, and also to ensure that we have the legislative backup and whatever other requirements we have in order to ensure that we can get that companies, that community groups, that community facilities can get insurance, and that we can go about living our lives the way we have done in the last while. Otherwise, we're not only going to impact on businesses, put people out of work, but we are also going to reduce the opportunities that we have in order to carry out any of the extracurricular activities that we would all engage in. This is going to impact on all sports clubs, sports groups. Here, this is from everything from the GAA to eventually to karate clubs, to all sorts of martial arts, boxing, you name it, it's going to be impacted. And we need to ensure that that we have solutions as quickly as possible. But the other problem is it is now falling into other sectors, and eventually it'll impact on retail and areas where at this point in time we say are absolutely low risk. But the problem is that this pandemic in relation to insurance is spreading through the entire industry and will impact on every sector. So we need to ensure it's arrested as soon as possible, and we need to ensure that solutions such as Mandy Fee and Pelican's solution as regards ELISA is taken up by government and supported, and we also need to ensure that the action that's required is taken by government in relation to ensuring that we deal with the high payouts and that all necessary legislation is enacted.